In the labyrinthine streets of Little Italy, where the scent of garlic and oregano mingles with whispered secrets, a legend was born on March 15, 1914. At 232 Mulberry Street, in a tenement building that had witnessed countless immigrant dreams, Aniello Dellacroce entered a world that would shape him into one of organized crime's most feared and respected figures. But this wasn't just another gangster's tale. This was the story of a man whose very appearance would defy every stereotype of what a mafioso should look like, earning him a nickname that would both puzzle and intimidate his enemies. Aniello Dellacroce was not your typical mobster, and it showed from the moment he was born. While his neighbors bore the olive complexions and dark features typical of southern Italian immigrants, young Aniello possessed fair skin, medium brown hair that would turn prematurely white, and piercing light blue eyes that seemed to see straight through a person's soul. These striking features, so unlike his Mediterranean contemporaries, would eventually earn him the peculiar moniker, the Pollack, a nickname that spoke to how dramatically he stood apart from the crowd, even in appearance. Growing up in the heart of Little Italy wasn't just about learning the old country's traditions, it was about understanding the unwritten rules of the street. The Dellacroce household wasn't immune to these influences. Young Aniello shared his formative years with his brother Carmine, who would later become entangled in the same underworld that would consume their family. But while many Italian-American families of the era struggled to keep their children away from the allure of easy money and street respect, the Dellacroce boys seemed drawn to it like moths to a flame. The transformation from neighborhood kid to made man didn't happen overnight. In the late 1930s, as America teetered on the brink of war and the Great Depression still cast its long shadow over working-class families, Aniello made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He joined the Mangano crime family, one of New York's most powerful criminal organizations. This wasn't a casual association or a temporary alliance. This was a blood oath that would bind him to a life of violence, loyalty, and uncompromising silence. By the early 1940s, as American soldiers were fighting fascism overseas, Dellacroce was fighting his own battles on the streets of New York. His official induction as a made soldier came during these turbulent years, marking his formal entry into a brotherhood that valued omerta above all else. But becoming a soldier was just the beginning. It was like earning the right to audition for a role in a deadly play where improvisation could mean the difference between life and death. The year 1951 brought seismic changes to the criminal landscape that would forever alter Dellacroce's trajectory. Vincent Mangano, the family's namesake boss, mysteriously disappeared, the kind of disappearance that in mob circles usually involved cement shoes and deep water. In the power vacuum that followed, Albert Anastasia, known throughout the underworld as the Mad Hatter for his unpredictable violence, emerged as the new leader. For Dellacroce, this transition represented opportunity wrapped in danger. Working under Anastasia was like dancing with dynamite. The man was notorious for his hair-trigger temper and his willingness to eliminate anyone he perceived as a threat. Yet for Dellacroce, this mentorship proved invaluable. Under Anastasia's tutelage, he learned the delicate art of intimidation, the calculated use of violence, and perhaps most importantly, how to command respect through presence alone. Those piercing blue eyes that had made him stand out as a child now became weapons of psychological warfare. The 1950s and 60s witnessed Dellacroce's meteoric rise through the organization's ranks. His elevation to capo of the prestigious Mulberry Street crew wasn't just a promotion. It was recognition of his unique combination of intelligence, ruthlessness, and unwavering loyalty. The Mulberry Street crew operated from the very neighborhood where he was born, creating a poetic symmetry that wasn't lost on those who understood the importance of territory in organized crime. As a capo, Dellacroce commanded respect that extended far beyond his immediate crew. His reputation as an enforcer grew with each successful operation, each problem solved with clinical efficiency. But what truly set him apart wasn't just his capacity for violence. It was his ability to inspire absolute loyalty in his subordinates while maintaining the kind of discipline that other families envied. October 25, 1957, marked another pivotal moment in both Dellacroce's career and the history of organized crime. Albert Anastasia, the man who had been his mentor and protector, was gunned down in the barbershop of the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan. The assassination, carried out with military precision, sent shockwaves through the underworld and created another power vacuum that ambitious men were eager to fill. In the aftermath of Anastasia's murder, Carlo Gambino emerged as the new boss of what would soon be renamed the Gambino crime family. For Dellacroce, this transition presented a crucial test of his political acumen. Despite his deep loyalty to Anastasia, he demonstrated the kind of pragmatic flexibility that separated successful criminals from dead ones. Rather than resist Gambino's ascension or seek revenge for his fallen mentor, Dellacroce chose to support the new regime. This decision proved to be a masterstroke of strategic thinking. Gambino, recognizing both Dellacroce's value and the potential threat he could pose, elevated him to the position of underboss, replacing Joseph Biondo. The appointment wasn't just a reward for loyalty, it was a calculated move to keep a dangerous man close while utilizing his considerable talents for the family's benefit. The role of underboss in a major crime family isn't ceremonial. It's the difference between chaos and order, between a loosely affiliated group of criminals and a disciplined military organization. For nearly 3 decades, Dellacroce would hold this position, becoming the iron fist in Gambino's velvet glove. His reputation for strict discipline and unwavering control over street operations became legendary throughout the 5 families of New York. What made Dellacroce particularly effective wasn't just his willingness to use violence, it was his restraint in its application. His cold demeanor and intimidating presence meant that often, a single stare from those pale blue eyes was enough to resolve disputes that might otherwise require bloodshed. Associates spoke in hushed tones about his ice-cold stare, a look that could freeze the most hardened criminals in their tracks. The Rave Night Social Club at 247 Mulberry Street became more than just Dellacroce's base of operations. It became a symbol of his power. Located in the heart of Little Italy, just blocks from where he was born, the club served as both fortress and court. Here, disputes were settled, plans were made, and the business of organized crime was conducted with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 corporation. But Dellacroce's influence extended far beyond the walls of the Rave Night. His crew, known simply as the Mulberry Street Crew, became one of the most feared and respected factions within the Gambino family. The men who served under him weren't just criminals. They were carefully selected individuals who shared his code of silence and his commitment to the organization above all else. However, even the most carefully constructed criminal empire eventually faces the one enemy it cannot intimidate, bribe, or eliminate: the relentless pursuit of federal law enforcement. For Dellacroce, the game of cat and mouse with authorities had begun decades earlier, creating a pattern that would define his entire adult life and ultimately contribute to his downfall. The first crack in young Aniello's armor appeared in 1930, when he was just 16 years old. A store burglary charge resulted in 2.5 years at Elmira Reformatory, a harsh introduction to the criminal justice system that might have deterred a different kind of young man. But for Dellacroce, prison became a graduate school in criminal methodology, where connections were forged and reputations were built behind bars. The arrest that followed painted a portrait of a man who lived perpetually on the edge of legal scrutiny. In 1934, a disorderly conduct charge. In 1937, felonious assault, earning him 6 months behind bars. By 1956, the charges had evolved to match his rising status: vagrancy, criminal association, and weapon possession. Each arrest was like a chess move in an elaborate game between Dellacroce and federal authorities, with both sides constantly adapting their strategies. The 1956 arrest outside the Rave Night Club revealed the FBI's growing awareness of Dellacroce's importance within the organization. Caught with 2 associates and charged with vagrancy and illegal weapon possession, the incident demonstrated how closely federal agents were monitoring his activities. But more importantly, it showed that even routine surveillance could yield significant intelligence about the inner workings of organized crime. 10 years later, in 1966, Dellacroce found himself at the center of what law enforcement dubbed the Little Appalachian Meeting, a reference to the infamous 1957 gathering that had exposed the existence of organized crime's National Commission. This Queen's meeting brought together bosses from multiple families across the United States, representing a rare opportunity for federal agents to observe the Mafia's highest echelons in action. When the dust settled, Dellacroce and numerous other high-ranking criminals found themselves facing conspiracy charges and contempt citations for their steadfast refusal to cooperate with grand jury investigations. The message was clear: the federal government was no longer content to prosecute street-level crimes. They were now targeting the organizational structure itself, seeking to understand and ultimately dismantle the very foundations of organized crime. The 1972 income tax evasion case marked a turning point in both Dellacroce's criminal career and federal prosecution strategy. The charges stemmed from his failure to report extorted stock in Yankee Plastics, a relatively minor financial crime that carried major symbolic weight. The sentencing judge didn't mince words, labeling Dellacroce a parasite and danger to society while imposing a 5-year federal prison sentence. But it was the events of 1979 that truly demonstrated the deadly serious nature of Dellacroce's world. Charles Calise, suspected of being a federal informant, was found murdered in a symbolic mafia-style execution that sent chills through both law enforcement and criminal circles. The message was unmistakable: cooperation with authorities carried the ultimate penalty. Dellacroce and Tony Plate found themselves indicted for murder and racketeering in connection with Calise's death. The case took a sinister turn when Plate mysteriously vanished, the kind of disappearance that in organized crime circles usually means a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Dellacroce, however, was ultimately acquitted, adding another layer to his reputation for both ruthlessness and legal invincibility. The 1980s brought an escalation in federal pressure that would have crushed a lesser criminal organization. Dellacroce faced indictment for grand jury contempt in connection with the assassination of Carmine Galante, the Bonanno family boss whose murder had shocked even hardened criminals with its brazen execution in a Brooklyn restaurant. The web of investigations was tightening, connecting Dellacroce to some of the most high-profile murders in organized crime history. By 1985, the federal government had assembled what they believed to be an airtight case against the aging underboss. Multiple RICO indictments charged him with extortion, gambling, murder, loan sharking, and a litany of other crimes that represented decades of criminal activity. More significantly, he was indicted as a member of the Commission, the governing body of organized crime, for racketeering activities that spanned the entire northeastern United States. But fate had other plans for Aniello Dellacroce. As federal prosecutors prepared for what promised to be the trial of the century, their primary defendant was fighting a different kind of battle entirely. Cancer and heart disease were ravaging his body, transforming the once intimidating figure into a shadow of his former self. The man whose ice-cold stare had once frozen hardened criminals in their tracks was now struggling with the most basic functions of daily life. December 1985 brought the end of an era. At Mary Immaculate Hospital in Queens, New York, Aniello Dellacroce died at age 71, taking with him decades of secrets that federal investigators desperately wanted to uncover. His death meant that he would never face trial on the 3 serious federal indictments pending against him, a final victory in his lifelong war against the authorities who had pursued him for over 5 decades. The power vacuum created by Dellacroce's death sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld that are still felt today. Just 2 weeks after his funeral, John Gotti, a rising star within Dellacroce's own crew, orchestrated the assassination of boss Paul Castellano outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. This brazen murder in the heart of Midtown Manhattan marked the beginning of a new, more flamboyant era for the Gambino family under Gotti's leadership. But perhaps the most tragic consequence of Dellacroce's criminal legacy was its impact on his own family. His son Armand had been indicted in the same 1985 RICO case that threatened to imprison his father for life. When faced with the prospect of lengthy federal imprisonment, Armand chose to flee rather than face justice. The stress and pressure of life as a fugitive proved too much for the younger Dellacroce. At just 32 years old, he died from a cerebral hemorrhage while in hiding, a victim of the same criminal world that had elevated his father to legendary status. The story of Aniello Dellacroce represents more than just the biography of a single criminal. It's a window into the evolution of organized crime in America, the development of federal law enforcement tactics, and the ultimate price paid by those who choose a life outside the law. His legacy continues to influence both criminal organizations and law enforcement strategies to this day. From his birth on Mulberry Street to his death in a Queens hospital bed, Dellacroce's life spanned nearly the entire golden age of American organized crime. He witnessed the transformation of small neighborhood gangs into sophisticated criminal enterprises, the development of federal law enforcement from local police work to complex racketeering investigations, and the ultimate decline of the very organization he had served with unwavering loyalty. The pale blue eyes that had once struck fear into the hearts of enemies and inspired loyalty in associates were finally closed, but the legend of the Pollack lives on. His story serves as both a cautionary tale about the inevitable consequences of criminal life and a fascinating glimpse into a world that most people can only imagine through movies and television shows. If you've been captivated by the rise and fall of Aniello Dellacroce, then you've only scratched the surface of organized crime's most compelling stories. Subscribe to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans for more deep dives into the lives of the men and women who built criminal empires, challenged federal authorities, and ultimately paid the price for their choices. From the boardrooms of legitimate business to the back rooms of social clubs, we'll continue exploring the hidden history that shaped America's criminal landscape. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we uncover the secrets that powerful people thought would never see the light of day.